You still have something to say. I was just gonna have
Well,
a
no, I
statement.
was I was just saying I have a good transition into our next topic if you
Do it.
want me to go. Okay, so yeah, our next topic is going to be the DC riots. Obviously, we all know what's going on there. So
I don't.
Big
to
current event time.
oh yeah, so to kind of blend in the black and white with this one, so I actually got in a little Twitter fight about it, and I essentially, I mean, it wasn't that I was defending the DC riots at all because I highly disagree with them, but it was a certain individual basically posted about the DC riots and how, and immediately compared it to the BLM and George Floyd protests and how, and they basically said that the DC riots, all the people there were white Trumpers and they were like let off the hook from the police. And of course, I looked into it and I did a lot of like research, and it ended up being that I found out that there was a higher arrest rate and there was a higher death rate in the DC riots. It was a lot more deadly and more people were arrested than uh, the BLM and George Floyd riots. And they, of course, got really mad at me and they ended up calling me like a Trumper. And I was like, I don't even support Trump. Like, I'm not even a Republican. So, and that just goes with the black and white thing. But yeah, it's kind of my little
Yeah,
intro
like
into the DC riots.
yeah, because like I don't. I'm as I had stated earlier. Like truly, my only news source is social media because
Yeah,
I
yeah,
don't. Who wants to watch the news in the first place? But um,
seriously.
yeah, like I've never had that interest in politics to go out and be and research it myself either
Mm-hmm.
because I personally I don't like talking about politics.
Yeah.
My mind's so unconclusive about what I want or what I personally believe or want to support, and that kind of
Yeah.
ties into that complex thinking I always have with each situation that comes up. And so I've always just stayed away from that specifically because I feel like that's where the black and white really kicks in so hard.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
I would rather just avoid it all
Yeah.
altogether personally. And at the same time, I feel like that's kind of like the easy way out of
I mean,
it.
it's fine, but yeah, but then there's me. Like I'm considering majoring in political science, so I'm big into politics. But anyways, Peyton, I want to hear your views on the DC riots.
Um, I don't know where I saw this, but this man named James Townsend was the at the initial like siege of the Capitol, and he has an entire highlight on Instagram. I think you guys should go check it out. His
Okay.
tag is James Goes Places, and the highlight's called 1621. I think everyone needs to really go and see how many people were there. Let alone we're in the middle of a pandemic. Two, like this is a this is a mob. Like there are hundreds of thousands of people sieging the Capitol on like just I don't know. I just think it's crazy to think that this many people can still congregate into one space.
Yeah.
Uh, Number one. Uh, but for all those who are calling this a peaceful protest and really just like
Yeah.
defending the
No one
fact
should be calling it that.
that anybody can, express their First Amendment rights is, I mean, just clearly, clearly wrong. And anybody can attack me for this, but in the First Amendment, it's specifically says peacefully assemble, and
Mm-hmm.
there was nothing peaceful about when I watched a live captured video of what happened. I mean,
I
there's no reason that we should deface property and push people over. And honestly, from a police's like perspective, like it's really hard to try to control a mob without having to use tear gas. But it's still like there's no reason to like force people to do that.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really not okay.
yeah
Mm-hmm.
And
Yep.
to like our entire goal here is to not downplay anybody's emotions, but that's literally all this crowd is doing is saying like we don't care about the 81.3 million people that voted Democrat. Like this is all about us, the Americans, and they're basically just shutting out every liberal in the country. And I think it's just really sad to see the divide between Republican and Democrat because there's just so much involved. I mean,
Yeah.
that's just my
yeah
No.
first
Yeah.
point
like
is
I agree.
it's just definitely a riot. as Tristan stated, it's a DC riot. There's no
Yeah,
protest going
I
on.
like even when I was in my like the Twitter fight, I don't think I once called it a protest because it's clearly not a
It does
protest.
not deserve that title.
It was a riot. Like it was a riot. Anyone who says it was a protest didn't see any of the footage. And I guess maybe not disagree with you, but maybe just put in there. I do think there were peaceful people there who were probably like I saw interviews of people who were
Absolutely.
like I think there were people there who got interviewed and they're like those people are running in and like they are not us. Like we're here peacefully and we did not want to siege the Capitol at all. And the people who did siege it, like you are rioters, you are not peaceful at all. And I
See,
think
and
there were peaceful there.
this is the problem is because you either see the entire mob as
Exactly.
extremely like everyone's very violent and aggressive, or
Mm-hmm.
you see them entirely as like peaceful. So
Exactly.
if anybody wanted to know, over the summer there was a George Floyd, uh, I guess, vigil at the Boise State Capitol here in Idaho, and I actually went to it, and it was like completely peaceful. There were no altercations that were like big enough to cause serious injury or harm, and that's
Yeah.
like this is a very peaceful way to assemble and protest.
Mm.
And I was here in Boise, but there's a big difference between going to support your ideals
Yep.
and peacefully assemble and your freedom of speech. You definitely have all of those things listed in the First Amendment, but there
Mm.
are a lot of ways that the media can over proportionalize things.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one thing I want to
Go
bring
ahead.
up, because again, all I've seen is just tidbits here and there on social media. One thing, just to a little point, it's not what I want to ask you. Just one thing, a little point I've noticed is like the people calling the DC riots peaceful protests and stuff, like defending the DC riots, are the same people that were condemning the Black Lives Matter movements. And that's also vice versa that I've noticed is this, the people who supported the Black Lives Matter movements are so against the DC riots, and it's just constant comparison between it. And I personally don't think you should compare the two, and it's kind of not a healthy way to solve the issue in the first place. And that's kind of where I see the black and white mindset battling itself. Is they're just comparing these riots because one instance, what's been associated is the Black Lives Matter movements associated on the far left side of the political spectrum, where these DC riots are associated on the far right side. And so there's that comparison and clash going on between them. That's from what I've noticed. Like, I could be wrong there, but like
Perfect analogy, just for the educated view, is confidence does not come with comparison. Confidence comes when where you can show your ability and not have to compare yourself to anybody else. I mean, that's just if you were any professional athlete, I know you would agree with me. If I'm out in a golf tournament, I'm not trying to say like, oh, I have to beat this person. You're out there to beat yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I've done that like
like
constantly.
comparing, like you said, these two different movements is neither here nor there. They both have their good ideals and their bad ideals. I know Tristan and I can go on and on about how the Black Lives Matter movement has been associated with a lot of negative things when the core idea itself is very specific and
Yeah.
supportive
Yeah.
Yep.
to.
So the point I wanted to get in. Sorry if I'm cutting you off in your
No,
thought,
it's
No,
but
fine.
go ahead.
the point I want to get in there is it is actually a comparison between the two, even though I don't think they should be comparison. It's just something I'm seeing,
Exactly, and that's what I
and
was advocating.
yeah, I'm gonna make this comparison because it's something I'm seeing, and it's just something I want to bring up for the show, and about the topic is I'm seeing compare a big like it seems like a loud voice that's going on about how the police have responded to both situations. Even though I've also seen stuff that you could say similarities, but it seems like a lot of um, racist comparisons are being made where the police responded more racist against the Black Lives Matter movement, and the police are standing down here for the DC riots. That's what I'm seeing on the social media, that comparison
Yeah.
there. So I just want to see what you guys
It's
have
for me.
in
It's
that.
simply not true. Like that's just me, though. I first of all, I would make the argument that at least 50% of the Black Lives Matter and George Floyd protests were white anyway. But I actually to so I'll go back to that. But to get to just go over what Payne said, the Black Lives Matter movement. I agree. Like there's a lot of ideals I really dislike about the Black Lives Matter movement, but the core principle of the Black Lives Matter movement I agreed with, and it's actually why I'd actually side with the BLM and George Floyd protests more than the DC riot, because the DC riot was so dumb. Like it really didn't have any base to it. There was no
The purpose was to obstruct justice
yeah
because there
like
was like
why?
voter fraud.
Yeah, and see that's why I think
Apparently,
even a lot of Republicans didn't really agree with it, and I will admit there were probably a lot of Republicans that did agree, but there were some Republicans that disagreed with it.
I
And I
bet there
think
was a lot of
there's
questioning, like you said,
oh
political
yeah,
ideals. It's just
absolutely,
makes you
absolutely,
really
but
reflect
yeah,
on what you really believe in.
yeah,
You know, if you're a Republican and you're sitting here watching people like you take, storm the Capitol and deface property and push people over
yep,
and, invade Senate chambers, like,
yep,
can you envision yourself in that position? And
yeah,
if you
exactly,
can, like, that's great, you're a Republican. But
yeah.
if you
Well,
can't,
at the same
then what are
time,
you?
yeah, and at the same time, like as much as I lean Democrat, for some reason I like to just tend to identify myself as Republican. So as my Republican side, it like pissed me off because it was like
Two
you just
different
made
brains.
yeah, exactly. It made me like hate being a Republican because I was like, why would you do this and make every single Republican look bad? Like this one act made everyone look bad. And I'd even go on the Black Lives Matter side and say that all those people who like half burned down Portland made Democrats look really bad.
Looted and
Yeah,
were
you made
actually
Democrats look really
rioting and
bad.
defacing
Yeah,
business fronts and vandalizing.
exactly.
So
Like
I wanna,
you can't do that. But do you want me to get back to your point, Taylor, about or do you want me to?
yeah, like
Okay.
I mean, um, because
So much happening. There's so many
my
people.
Yeah,
yeah
that's
yeah no, you're fine. Like my question is like, what can you say about how the police have responded? Like, because just from what I've known and I've heard you talk about it a little bit when we were talking before we started, is like
mhm.
you the way the police have responded isn't different than the Black Lives Matter, or like
I well, because obviously they responded different, but in my opinion, it's because the Black Lives Matter movement and the George Floyd protests were so much larger scale. There were millions more people. That it was a lot more property damage. That it was a lot harder to contain. So of course they had to up their game a little bit. But at the same time, like I researched like the deaths and the arrest rates, and it was higher in the DC riots. My numbers are probably off on maybe arrest rates, but the deaths are pretty easy to keep
well
track of. So, and
well
it was higher in DC riots.
how how is it being compared with the DC riots
Should do a
and
little
the Black Lives Matters?
research.
Because the Black Lives Matter
Oh,
movement was happening across the country versus
yeah,
the
yeah.
DC riots are centralized in DC.
I see
So
what you're
like, how
saying.
is that
Yeah,
comparison being made?
yeah. I guess I couldn't really answer because I'm sure in some places the yeah I get what you're saying. In some places, I'm sure the police were at
Yeah.
a different scale of policing than in other areas.
Okay. So like
I just went over overall, so
yeah.
that's what I went over.
I guess I also want to ask, like, say if it was the higher arrest rates in the DC riots more than all of the Black Lives Matter movement across
Yes.
the country,
Yeah.
or just
Yep.
a central town across the
Yeah.
country.
It was higher. The death rate and the arrest rate was higher uh, when compared to across the country. Yeah.
Across the country, and see, like, it's just those comparisons. Obviously, like, even
Yeah.
then, each of those, I'm thinking how it can be more complex there too, because I mean,
Oh, definitely.
you take Minneapolis and Portland; those are two separate scenarios
Hmm.
going on under the guise of the same thing. And I've seen multiple things, as you guys were mentioning. There's peaceful protesters at both the George Floyd stuff and the DC riot stuff. Um, how they were saying these aren't us, we don't know who they are. I've seen that have
Yep.
all of those as well, and so it's like I that's where I want to say I think it's unhealthy to compare those two in the
Oh
first
yeah,
place.
and see, and I honestly don't like comparing them because again, it forces you to look at it black and white, and it's just not true. It's not black and white. Like there are people who are Democrats or for the Black Lives Matter movement who disagreed with the writing, like me, honestly. There's a lot of there's a lot of ideals that Black Lives Matter organization has put forth that I really don't like, which made me not like them even more. But for the most part, the center core idea I agreed with, and same with the DC riot. I mean, I support Trump, but after like all that, I didn't, because I was like, this is a terrible move from Republicans, and so it just shows that it's really not black and white. Like you can't have the view of black and white. You can't compare the Black Lives Matter and DC riots. It's just
Yeah. Like
it's hard to do. One, it's hard to do, and two, it make it just makes you look like you're trying to say something that has nothing to do with the riots, if that makes
yeah,
sense.
it's like something I've noticed is it seems like it's more people trying to just or not justify but prove that there's racism in America, and they're
Yeah,
using the riots as a way to prove that. And
yeah, and that's
like
been my
for
biggest thing too.
I think for me it's like I already know there is. Why are we addressing the racism part when we need to just
Exactly.
address the problem
Yeah,
itself?
I'm exactly the same. Like it's why do you have to make the United States seem way more racist than like it already is? Like we understand there are racist people in America. Why do you have to make it seem like 100%
Well,
of
like
America is
even then,
racist, and
like
specifically like Republicans?
well, like to counter that, like I mean, is I want to take away that there's that racism involved and stuff. Like you kind of said, why are you making it seem more racist than it already is? Uh, I would, I'm. That's not the point I'm trying to make, and I'm not sure how I want to answer that, but or address that. But it's more like we we already know there's the racism involved, and not that we shouldn't address that, but it seems to be the only priority people have rather than actually
Okay, I see.
solving what's going on. It's like, oh, rather than talk about the DC riots actually happening, they're just saying, oh well, the comparison is the police
The
backed
police
off
being more
against
racist.
these white rioters versus the black rioters at Black
I
Lives
see. Yeah.
Matters. That's the comparison they're making rather than being like, what's wrong with people rioting in the first place? Like, why are we doing
Yeah, I
that?
see.
Let's not do
Yeah,
that.
people seem to jump to race super fast.
Yeah, like that. It's like they have to.
That's a good point. I
It's
mean,
like they have to
people love
assure
to jump to
themselves.
race.
Yeah, like to me, it just seems like people have to assure themselves that they're right, that there's racism, and it's like
Yeah.
no one's. I don't see many people saying there isn't, and it seems like that's all that's going on. Is just like there's the people saying there is, and then there's the people saying no, there isn't, like defending that there isn't racism, but like
Yeah, and
it's
yeah,
like
and
that's
that's
not the
another
problem.
black and white thing. Like,
Yeah, it's
I
like
think everyone can agree there is a certain degree of racism. I'm on the side of I don't think it's as prominent and as affecting towards like minority communities, specifically like black communities, as the left seems. But I think it's a lot more than like the right seems. But I do tend to side on it's not as prominent. But I think Peyton probably has something to say. He had
well,
no
like
idea.
I think that
Yeah.
like the reason I want I'm not gonna bother putting my input on. I think it is more prominent or less prominent. Is I think that's even a black and white like answer. Like I just think it's way too complex. I mean, you still have two separate cities in the first place. You have DC versus Minneapolis that's being compared in the first place. That's
Hmm.
I don't think that's a good thing at all. You have two different. It's not the same people riding at DC that were riding at Minneapolis. So how can you compare that? At the same time, it's not the
Hmm.
same police officers. So why are you comparing that? It's not the same
Yeah.
situation, so why is it being compared? And I just think that comparison needs to go away in the first place.
Well, I'll just sorry, Payne. I'll just respond really quick to that because I want to. But the reason I'm not trying to see it in black and white, just like because I'd say the left side says one thing, the right side says one thing, but I think the reason that you claim that my view might be a little black and white is because I like to come to solutions. I don't like to leave it on. Okay, well maybe there's like some middle ground, and I don't
Yeah.
want to.
Well,
Like I'm
I
not a big
think
fan of that.
I
So.
well like the hard part for me is it's like I do like those solutions, and how
Mhm.
I would see the solution is I try and because it's so just there's so much that I can't generalize just the DC situation
Okay.
as
Yeah.
less racist. So I think of it, I try and think of it down to each individual person. Like if I truly wanted it to be able to say my absolute like solution thought on it, I would have to
Mhm.
go and we'd have to take. I'd have to take an example from each encounter. So if there's 100,000 people there, and
Okay, I need to get my laptop charger. Sorry, that's
Okay.
been.
Yeah. That's
that's
fine.
fine.
I'll be right back.
So like you have say 100,000 rioters and 200 police that are responding. That's just the example. I'd have to look at each individual encounter and say a solution for each counter. I couldn't do a broad thing and say one thing because I know people are like, if I said the way the 200 police responded to the 100,000 people, I couldn't say that was or wasn't racism, because then someone would say counter me and say, well, I think it was, because it's like, well, yeah, because I mean, it's such a broad generalization in the first place. I'd have to go look at each individual counter. So I could be and say these 50 cops responded in a racist way, the 150 cops responded in a different way type deal, and that's how I'd have to see it if I wanted to make my own solution, come up with a solution on it.
Okay, that's fair.
And that's just like my problem with it.
No, that's fair. I guess our only difference is you're a lot more like personal with like solution, whereas I like to see like the broad group. But I see both as pros. So, anyways, Peyton's back. So, Peyton has it.
Okay, so to bring us back, I went ahead and looked just the like statistics for the DC riots, and then just looked up like stats for the BLM movements. And a new report says 93% of BLM protests have been peaceful, and this is coming from a report called Heavy. It's like from the U.S. Crisis Monitor, and I think that's really interesting because if you scroll down, and this is just on Wikipedia, so it could literally be edited by anybody, but 5 dead, 4 rioters, and 1 police officer, and there are like 56 officers are injured, and like more than 80 people have been arrested, and there's actually titled them as rioters. So I mean, there's just a lot in that because you think that the BLM movement was not just in Portland. Like, there were so many other places.
Hold on.
Wait, hold on.
So,
Is his voice cutting out or like being?
Yeah, his voice is kind of scratchy for me too.
Yeah.
okay.
Hey, Tristan, can you do it? Can you put him in the other voice chat and bring him back in?
Hold on, Peyton. Just hold on, Peyton.
Technical difficulties. Alright, you might have to return on your camera.
You can hear us.
There we go. Maybe.
Good work.
I don't know if that's.
I don't know what happened. Is that better?
Still kind of scratchy for some reason. What the heck?
Interesting. Let me.
Oh wait. Now it sounds.
Is this any better?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay.
It just sounded like you were.
Sound like you're just scratchy.
Yeah.
So you're good now.
Sorry to interrupt you there. It's just I would rather get that solved.
Oh, good. Fine. Technical difficulties.
Yeah.
I looked up statistics for the BLM and for the DC riots, and a new report from the U.S. Crisis Monitor actually gives 93% of the BLM protests as peaceful. And if you think about it, it wasn't just like in Portland. Like there were so many other places that this was happening. And then you look at the DC riots and you see that 4 people are dead, including a police officer, which makes 5. And then you have 80 plus rioters who were arrested, and north of 56 people are injured. And this was just like in one place. And you got to think like the District of Columbia is not very big. So
Yeah.
the fact that it was so much more concentrated and dense, and there's so much more happening, just tells you how it isn't a protest.
Yeah. I'm just laughing because I'm laughing because this whole thing was saying we shouldn't compare them, and here we are continuing to compare.
Yeah,
them.
I mean it's kind of hard because everyone's comparing them.
Yeah.
Like, if you don't compare them, it's like you can't really make a oh wait, he's scratchy again. Peyton, you're scratchy again.
I
wonder if it's his internet.
It could be your internet.
Because, I mean, his video is also bugging out.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I can still continue to talk a little bit.
Go ahead.
Like, one thing, like, kind of a guilty thing I want to say is, like, as much as I disagree with this stuff going on, I love the memes coming from it. Someone like ate.
They're great.
Someone ate all the food in Nancy Pelosi's fridge. I just think it's like what a power play. You know what I mean? Like I just think it's so stupid.
Going back to like not comparing it. I mean, it's hard to like not compare it because everyone wants to compare it, but I don't know. It's kind of
So I mean, do what you can, I guess, to not compare it and still talk about it. I don't know what if you guys came into it with the point, like the points you wanted to make were the comparison, but if you have other things you want to talk about it, where it's not the comparison, let's try and go that route if you can.
Say
Go ahead,
a couple
Peyton.
more things. Another couple points that I had listed were embarrassment to other world leaders. So highly elected officials like the Chancellor in Germany and the Prime Minister in the UK have labeled this event as like an embarrassment to the United States. And it, I feel like if I was in a position to like compare myself to another world leader that had this happening under their nose, I would feel ashamed to be listed next to that person, really,
Mm.
because it almost like gives a discredit to people who have attained such highly elected offices. And it's really, I mean, U.S. nationalism is in the title for usually like high interviews and it's just prejudice and it's really
Oh
just
no! Oh no! Wait! Peyton, you're scratchy
I
again.
was trying to let it go, but it just got.
Well, it was fine for a second. It was actually fine, and
Yeah.
then he started scratching out.
Yeah.
We got halfway through it.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Well,
Like, well, do you have say like earbuds at all, like that have a microphone on it? Because that would probably work 300 times better.
Thanks.
I don't even hear him anymore.
I don't hear.
I
He's gone.
I just loved his.
Oh, okay.
I loved his facial reactions as he was trying
He's
to
like-
find
Yeah.
But yeah, like one thing on him, like that embarrassment and stuff. Like one thing with the generalization of rioters and stuff, just how people are so negative about it, and it goes with that Black Lives Matter movement as well. The actions of the few dictate the image of the many, or however that saying goes. Like you see that happen with all sorts of things, you know, like one problem we had when like Trump was first elected was the travel bans on Middle Eastern countries because of the actions of a few, and then so many people were so quick to agree with him and label all of Islam as terrorists, and like it like I can't even imagine the emotional trauma that has caused on like people in America who come from that background or who are active worshippers of the Islam faith as well. Like just the stereotypes that come with it. I can't even imagine that. That's it's just like it's such a terrible thing, and I can see why, like when you said like as sort of being associating yourself as a Republican even though you're left, seeing what's happening at the DC riots like that, it just makes you go like, why am I even associated with you guys, you know? Like it just makes you, it's just that embarrassment there too, you know?
Yeah. Well, and I think it's probably the same with like those terrorist attacks when the travel ban happened. They were probably like embarrassed that like
there is those radical
members of their background did that in America or were threatening that and threatening terrorism to Americans. They were probably thinking the same thing, like, why do I even associate with you people? And that's probably how a lot of people, well, I know it's how a lot of Republicans and people who support Trump or whatever feel about the riots. It's like embarrassing. It's like, why am I even? And then it sucks too because now they're all being grouped together in this one group of, oh, they must all be racist and they must all be terrorists because this one group of people decided to raid the Capitol building. So kind of sucks, but
yeah, like one thing, like some like a point I want to make is it's like they believe in democracy so much that they're gonna overthrow it. You know, like
yeah.
We need the fair trial so badly that we're gonna just ruin our fucking Capitol building. You know, like I love democracy. Let's fuck it up.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's stupid, really. It's annoying. I don't know if Peyton's here. I was gonna say, if Peyton, if you can hear me, you could try just going with audio instead of video. That might help, but I don't know. If you're talking, we can't hear you. Rip.
This whole time he was like saying a whole sentence.
Yeah, probably.
Paragraph.
Work.
It's bad if you can hear me.
And yeah, it's just scratchy.
Yeah, it's still.
I'm not sure
Yeah.
why it is. I take it you don't have like earbuds or anything. I get you.
You can't hear me. You could try. Okay, just try not using your camera and just using audio. But I don't know if that'll work.
Are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. I honestly don't know why. I literally have cable internet. I don't know why it's a problem.
Rip. It's fine.
Yeah, it's not the worst thing. We're low budget.
Yeah, we're low budget.
What I was getting to is
Okay.
listing myself amongst another world leader that has this happening under their nose would be an embarrassment.
Mhm.
And it's like the display that's happening is not a way to like categorize your beliefs in such a way that like where you should feel safe. It really is just a place of prejudice and fear and shame, in my opinion. So that's
I
what I
have a
was saying
question.
earlier. Yeah.
So do you think it was just as embarrassing when the Black Lives Matter movement and George Floyd protests were looting and stuff? Do you think it was just as much of an embarrassment?
Absolutely.
And if so,
Yeah.
why wasn't it given as much media attention that it was an embarrassment?
I think because it uh, nearly obviously deviated from the ideals of the movement.
Okay.
Right. Black Lives Matter is getting into like the First Amendment of not First Amendment, like the 14th, 15th, and 16th Amendments, that collection that happened uh, over that span in history is that everybody who is a citizen and basically pays their taxes in this country has equal rights, and everyone has a basic social right to be included in anything and not be discriminated against. And what really is the meaning behind Black Lives Matter is that they've been excluded from that definition for so long that it needs to be said black instead of all, because
Mm-hmm.
and that's just the big point for me, is that
Okay.
it's very obviously been racist and discriminatory against black people. So the fact that it deviated so heavily from the core ideal of the movement was like honestly an embarrassment to
Okay. Yeah.
I would agree.
All right. I'll go with that.
But I wanted to touch on what Taylor said for like democracy. This is something that I thought about. I don't typically like sit down and write out a lot of my thoughts, but I was working really late the day that the DC riots actually started, and when I got home, I was like, I really don't like have the mind to sit down and absorb all this. So I did it the next morning, the morning of the 6th actually, and it was watching a lot of the live news, and I felt so compelled as to just start writing down what I was thinking. And what came to mind is the definition of liberal democracy. This is something that I also studied in my Foundations of Schooling course here at the college. Is that liberal democracy is like an umbrella term for like the right to education for all of our children in this country, and like the right to understand their place and what they can make of their life. And it's not
Yeah.
really so liberal democracy does not mean democracy for liberals, but I thought it was really interesting that Taylor said something about this. Like let's support democracy so hard that we destroy it is really kind of a great analogy to what has been happening. It's just because really, I mean, what happened was basically an obstruction of justice, if one could bring it to it. Like they were in the Senate chambers, which can be deemed like a court of law, or I mean, a place where justice is served. And the fact that people were disrupting this meeting was I mean, obviously an obstruction of justice, which is, I mean, classified as illegal. I guess I don't know if it's a felony or whatever, but
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not a major in law or anything, but
No. Yeah. I agree. Yeah.
so
Yeah. That's all I got.
And I hate this. You have a train of thought while someone's speaking, but once they're done, you're like, I don't even know where it went.
yeah, you're like, what happened?
um, Yeah, like I didn't like when I found out it was happening. I thought it was like I thought it was some like random meme going on. Like I just saw this like they overtook
It
the
does like the
Capitol
Northwest,
building.
doesn't it?
Yeah, I just
And
like
you're in Canada, we're in Idaho, so we're both in like the Northwest
yeah.
region of the United States. Like I feel very isolated from this. The fact that if I could travel 3,000 miles right now and actually see it with my own eyes, I would like. I think it would bring a different feeling than like seeing on media. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like I remember I just like hopped on Facebook one day and there's a picture of some dude with a goat head on his hat and it's like we've stormed the Capitol building. It was like, okay, what's this about? And then I kept seeing it more and I was like, wait a second, is this something actually going on? You know, like
Yeah.
it really like confused the heck out of
It's
me.
so funny. It's so funny. I was like, why? It's so dumb, but yeah. Yeah, I think. Yeah. Solid.
But yeah, like I didn't know, like I just found out that the Supreme Court or Senate was in session and they came in. So like that's a valid point. The obstruction of justice type like that. It does go back into
Not okay.
you love democracy so much you're gonna destroy it. Just
And literally, what they were doing was making a concise decision about the presidency.
mm,
So if this is what I really call me biased in one way or the other, but like if you really weren't afraid of the results, then why would you try to stop them?
yeah.
Because the point of the Senate meeting was to concisely agree on the president elect of the United States.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the other thing is like even Republicans in were in agreement that like Joe Biden won, so let's just get it over with. Let's make
And
the
this goes back
transition.
to the whole
And
black and
even
white thing.
oh yeah, and even Trump came out with his video and was like, yeah, I'll concede Joe Biden won, and there'll be a smooth process of transition, and
Yeah,
then
I
like
didn't
this
even
happened, and
Smooth
it was like,
process.
okay, like way to go, guys.
Smooth process.
Yeah, but yeah, so
But before that, I will add that he did quote all the like this. This may be verbatim. If it's not, it's like very, very close to. But all the vice president has to do is confirm the election, something, and you will be the happiest people. And who he was really speaking to are the 74 million people that voted for Trump. But really, what that's excluding is the 81 million people, and this is popular vote, that voted in favor of the Democratic Party.
yeah, yep.
And you're basically
Can you
discrediting that entire group of people.
dude has no boundaries, man.
So,
Sorry, roommates.
so it's just like when he said that he was speaking only to those who voted in his favor, and that's what
Yeah.
sucks about this whole extremist point of view is that it's all black and white. There's
Mm-hmm.
if you vote Republican, like you basically have to agree with everything that is Republican in that sense, and like who is that candidate. But if you go Democrat, like you have to be in agreement with like everything that they do. There's so much less third party voting. If this is what's really interesting to me, I actually researched like the past 10, 15 elections. And if you could go back and look, like there were so many different colors on the map because people were actually getting popular votes for third party.
Yeah.
And if you look at like the 2016 election, there were uh, who was the who was the candidate for the Green Party? I don't even remember her name.
Oh, was it Jorgensen?
No, that was
Yeah,
this one. Wait.
was it?
Yeah,
I thought it was
I don't
I
know.
thought Jorgensen
The main
was
third
this
party was
one.
the Green Party, and she was still like on the map, but
Yeah.
it was really just red.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if this was right. I think Tristan told me I was wrong. I saw stuff where it was like Trump went against Pence, like was saying stuff against his own vice president, and then as well,
Yeah.
Trump told the people to go storm the Capitol. Like he said, word for word, like we'll storm the Capitol building if we have to, or something like that. That's stuff I heard. I didn't see it with my own eyes. I didn't hear it with my own ears. I got
No,
that information from someone
I
else.
think I said that was true. Did I say it was false? Because it is true.
I thought you said Trump.
I think there's
you
a
told me
good
Trump
deal of
said
evidence to
he
say
doesn't
that it
support
was incited by the president of the United States.
Well, I mean, that would explain all the social media bans he has.
Yeah. Yeah, Trump did tweet in like basically throwing Mike Pence under the bus, which I thought was kind of funny. Like, but I don't know, it's just me. But the whole him inciting the Capitol raid, like by saying raid the Capitol, I don't know if that's true. He definitely did incite. He did say some things that were a little like, okay, dude, like, let's relax. You're
We're
out
gonna
of
do
office
everything
like
we
12
can.
days, okay? Like, chill out.
Yeah. I saw a pretty funny meme. It was this meme from Star Wars. It showed Palpatine and he's already like in his Sith form, and he's like, the attack on my life has left me scarred and deformed. It said the Senate, and then it was referencing the storming of the Capitol, and it was like a meme saying how because of this we're gonna turn into the first United Empire or something like that. It's just some stupid meme. But I guess it was in poor taste. Anyways, but yeah, I mean, I personally don't have any more about that. I don't know
Yeah,
how much you guys have.
I'm good. I think we've gone over everything, unless Peyton has anything else.
No, it was just a lot.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot.
Well, I mean,
yeah, I think that's good.
we're just about at 2 hours. We can still do our last topic, or we can save it for another time.
I say we do it since we have Peyton here. We can kind of make it quick. So
Quick, yeah. Yes.
somewhat.
Alright, so
Is it any better or bad?
yeah, you can keep
Seems
it on.
fine.
You can
keep it on. If it starts scratching, we'll let you know. You can just turn off your camera.
Well, I don't think that was the problem because he was scratching even without the camera.
Yeah, but it wasn't that bad. Anyways. Yep.
All right.